I'm questioning my boyfriend's stories and behavior. Should I confront him or let it go? I am 23 years old, and I've been with my boyfriend, Jim, who is 25, for a little over 5 years now. It feels surreal to think about how long we've been together, half a decade of shared memories, milestones, and challenges. Our journey began when we met in college. I can still remember the day we first locked eyes, seated across from each other in a bustling lecture hall. The air had been alive with the murmur of students, the scraping of chairs, and the occasional burst of laughter, but somehow, amid all the chaos, his gaze caught mine, and something clicked. It wasn't love at first sight, but there was an undeniable spark. In the beginning, everything felt like a whirlwind. We both enrolled at the same university after college, a coincidence that felt like fate, and our relationship blossomed quickly. University life was demanding, yet thrilling, and having him by my side was an anchor amidst the storm. Late-night study sessions turned into impromptu dates, shared meals in the cafeteria were filled with laughter, and our first apartment together became our little sanctuary. We thought we were invincible back then, young and in love, with the world at our feet. But life has a way of pulling you back to reality. After graduation, we faced a crossroads. Like many young couples, we were forced to grapple with the pressures of adulthood. With student loans, uncertain career paths, and no clear road map, we reluctantly moved back to our respective parents' homes. It was a sobering moment for both of us. I moved out on my own a year later, determined to carve out my independence, but Jim stayed with his parents. That was the first time I began to feel the cracks forming beneath the surface of our relationship. 8 months ago, everything changed. Jim set me down one evening, his face taut with a mixture of frustration and sorrow. He told me he wanted to end things. I could barely process his words as he explained that our relationship felt more like an obligation than a source of joy. "We're toxic for each other," he said, his voice strained. "I have no more friends because of us. I need to figure things out on my own." I was blindsided. His words hit me like a freight train, and my heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. For 5 years, we had built a life together, weathered the storms, celebrated the victories, and leaned on each other during the quiet, mundane moments. And now, it all felt like it was slipping away. The breakup lasted 2 weeks. Just when I had started to adjust to the idea of a life without him, Jim came back. He called me late one night, his voice trembling as he admitted he'd made a mistake. "I want us to try again," he said. "I miss you. I need you." I'll admit, part of me wanted to run back into his arms and pretend those 2 weeks had never happened. But another part of me hesitated. I knew we had unresolved issues, and I didn't want to fall back into the same patterns that had driven us apart. So, I suggested we take things slowly, give ourselves the time and space to work on our individual flaws and improve our communication. I thought it was a reasonable request, but Jim's reaction was swift and cutting. "I can't do that," he said, his tone sharp and final. "If that's your choice, then I'm done." The words stung, but I stood my ground. For the first time in our relationship, I prioritized my own needs over his. But his reaction left me shaken. I've known Jim to have a temper, something I learned early on in our relationship, but this was different. His anger felt like a storm brewing just beneath the surface, and it made me feel unsafe. I ended the conversation and left, my mind racing with doubts and questions. The next day, Jim called me again, apologizing profusely. He admitted he'd acted impulsively and wasn't ready to get back together after all. He proposed a compromise. We'd stay friends for the time being, keep things casual, and see where it led. I agreed, thinking it was the best way to preserve our bond while giving us both room to breathe. But that arrangement didn't stay casual for long. Slowly, friends turned into friends with benefits. Late-night calls led to sleepovers, and the lines between friendship and romance blurred until they were nearly indistinguishable. Now, Jim wants to make things official again, and I'm left grappling with a tangle of emotions. In many ways, it feels like we were never truly broken up. The connection between us never severed completely, but I can't shake the hesitation gnawing at my gut. Jim says he's been to therapy, a step I'd urged him to take for years, but he's already stopped going, claiming he doesn't need it anymore. It's hard to tell if he's genuinely changed or if he's just saying what he thinks I want to hear. The uncertainty is exhausting. I want to believe that Jim has grown, that we can rebuild what we had and make it even stronger. But a part of me wonders if I'm clinging to a relationship that's already run its course. After everything we've been through, I owe it to myself and to him to figure out what's truly best for us. The question is, do I have the courage to face the answer? Having some space to breathe has been both a blessing and a curse. It's given me the clarity I needed to reflect on Jim's behavior, yet that clarity has come with a heavy dose of doubt and second-guessing. I've always believed in the power of introspection, but this time, it feels like I'm opening a Pandora's box I may not be ready to face. Jim and I have always had different attitudes toward technology and communication. I'm not attached to my phone, never have been. Since I work from home, it's a necessary distraction to put it away for long stretches, allowing me to focus on the tasks at hand. I've explained this to him countless times, but it seems to fall on deaf ears. Whenever I miss one of his calls, the floodgates open. He'll call again, and again, and again, sometimes 12, sometimes over 40 times in a row. The barrage of missed calls alone is enough to make my stomach churn, but it's the messages that follow that truly unsettle me. "Why are you screening my calls?" he'll text, his words dripping with accusation. If I don't reply quickly enough, the texts grow colder, sharper, more pointed. "Are you with someone else? Are you cheating on me?" Each message feels like a slap, an unspoken reminder that he doesn't trust me despite my unwavering loyalty. Infidelity is a subject I've always approached with a sense of reverence and dread, a ghost lingering in the shadows of my family history. My parents' marriage unraveled due to betrayal, and I've sworn to myself I would never inflict that kind of pain on someone else. Yet Jim seems blind to this part of me, quick to assume the worst, and relentless in his paranoia. The constant accusations have become a thorn in my side, but the doubts they plant run deeper than I'd like to admit. Why does he mistrust me so intensely? Is it his own insecurities? Or something darker, a projection of behavior he's capable of himself? These questions linger, gnawing at me when I least expect them. The weight of it all is suffocating. It's not just his behavior in the present that gives me pause. Over the years, Jim has woven a tapestry of stories about his past, each one more dramatic than the last. For context, we live in a small town, one of those places where everyone knows everyone else's business. The kind of town where secrets rarely stay hidden for long, and truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply it's buried. Yet Jim's stories paint a picture of a life that feels at odds with the reality of our small town existence. He once claimed to have been associated with a gang. Not the kind of gang you'd find in sprawling urban centers, but still a group he described as dangerous and influential. I wanted to believe him, but something about it didn't add up. Our town is close-knit, and the thought of a gang operating under the radar seemed absurd. When I pressed him for details, his answers were vague, evasive, like smoke slipping through my fingers. Then there's his alleged history with substance abuse. According to Jim, he's battled addiction with a wide range of substances, things I can't even imagine him coming into contact with in our little corner of the world. Yet in all the years we've been together, I've never seen any signs of this. No withdrawals, no lingering cravings, no slips into old habits. It's as though this version of Jim exists only in the stories he tells, a shadowy figure I've never truly met. Perhaps the most haunting tale he's shared is the one about finding a body in the park. According to him, he stumbled across the remains of a man who had taken his own life, a traumatic experience that shaped him in ways I could never fully understand. At first, I was heartbroken for him, moved by the weight of what he must have endured. But over time, as I pieced together what I knew about our town and its history, doubts began to creep in. I searched for news articles, police reports, anything that could corroborate his story, but there was nothing. No whispers of tragedy, no murmurs of a life lost too soon. Even my family, who have lived here for decades, had no recollection of such an event. And then there's the story of his cousin, the one who, according to Jim, died in a car accident when they were both children. Jim claimed he was named after this older cousin, a boy his parents had taken in and raised like a son. The accident, he said, was too painful for anyone in his family to discuss, which is why it's never mentioned. At first, I accepted this explanation without question. Grief is a heavy burden, and everyone processes it differently. But as time passed, I started to notice inconsistencies. There are no pictures of this cousin, no memorials, no keepsakes. His name is never whispered in family gatherings. When I casually brought it up to Jim's parents once, their reaction was blank, as though the cousin had never existed. The more I think about it, the more these stories feel like puzzle pieces that don't quite fit together. Jim has a story for everything, an explanation, a justification, a way to frame the world around him. Over the years, he's recounted tales of past friends who wronged him, labeling them all as assholes who betrayed his trust. According to him, he's always been the victim, always the one left to pick up the pieces after someone else's cruelty. At first, I believed him. I sympathized, even. But now, I can't help but wonder, is Jim the victim he claims to be? Or is there another side to the story I'm not seeing? These doubts are like cracks spreading through the foundation of our relationship, threatening to bring everything tumbling down. I feel guilty for questioning him, for doubting the tragedies he's shared and the pain he's claimed to endure. What kind of partner does that make me? But at the same time, I can't ignore the nagging feeling that something isn't right. It's as though I'm losing my grip on reality, caught between the version of Jim I thought I knew and the version that's slowly unraveling before my eyes. I don't know what to do. Should I confront him about these stories? Should I dig deeper, search for the truth, even if it feels like a betrayal? Or am I overthinking everything, letting my doubts cloud my judgment and hurt someone I care about deeply? I want to do what's right for him, for me, for us. But with each passing day, the weight of uncertainty grows heavier, and I find myself sinking further into the mire of my own confusion. There are countless stories like this, each more intricate, dramatic, and emotionally charged than the last. It feels like Jim always has a tale to tell, an explanation to offer, or a vivid anecdote ready to insert into any situation. At first, I admired his ability to weave these narratives. They painted him as someone who had lived a life far richer in experience, heartbreak, and resilience than most people his age. He seemed worldly, layered, and full of mysteries that I felt privileged to unravel. But now, those stories don't feel like treasures. They feel like traps. Over time, I've begun to notice cracks in the facade, inconsistencies in the details, and outright contradictions that make it harder to believe everything he says. It started with small things, little white lies that anyone might overlook. He'd tell me he was somewhere he wasn't, or exaggerate an interaction with a coworker to make it sound more dramatic. At first, I didn't think much of it. Everyone embellishes their stories sometimes, right? But the lies grew, subtly at first, until I started questioning whether the bigger, more impactful stories were true at all. The story about his cousin stands out the most. According to Jim, his parents named him after this older cousin, a boy they took in and raised like their own. Jim described him as a brother in all but name, someone who shaped his childhood in profound ways. But when Jim was only 7, tragedy struck. The two of them were involved in a car accident that claimed his cousin's life. The way Jim tells it, the grief was so immense, so all-consuming, that his family collectively chose to bury it, not just the cousin, but the memory of him. No one speaks of him, no pictures hang on the walls, and no anniversaries are observed. When I first heard this story, I was heartbroken for Jim. The idea of losing someone so young, someone who was practically a sibling, was unimaginable. I wanted to comfort him, to be the safe space where he could finally let down his guard and share the pain he had carried for so long. But over the years, the details of this story started to nag at me. For one, there's no tangible evidence of this cousin's existence. I've spent countless hours at Jim's parents' house celebrating holidays, sharing meals, and flipping through old family photo albums. Not once have I seen a picture of this boy who was supposedly so pivotal to Jim's life. No one ever slips up and mentions his name in passing. It's as though he was never there to begin with. I've tried to make sense of this silence. Maybe the grief really is too overwhelming, I told myself. Maybe the family's way of coping is to act as though he never existed. But something about it feels too clean, too deliberate. It doesn't add up. One night, my curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to do some digging. I searched online, scouring old local news archives for any mention of a car accident that might match Jim's story. Our town is small, and news spreads quickly here. A tragedy like that, a child's life cut short, should have left a mark, some kind of public record. But there was nothing. Not a single article, obituary, or even a fleeting mention in the town's historical records. Still, I didn't want to give up. I asked around discreetly, speaking to people who had lived in town long enough to remember the events of Jim's childhood. My dad's side of the family has been here for decades, so I thought they might know something. But every conversation ended the same way, with puzzled looks and shrugs. No one had any recollection of such an accident, let alone a boy who fit the description of Jim's cousin. When I finally brought it up to Jim, his reaction caught me off guard. I expected him to be hurt, maybe even angry, that I was questioning something so personal. But instead, he seemed detached. "Why does it matter?" he said, his voice flat and defensive. "I've told you what happened. You don't need to dig into it." That response only fueled my doubts. If this cousin was as important to him as he claimed, wouldn't he want to share more, not less? Wouldn't he want me to understand the depth of his loss? The same pattern repeats itself with so many of Jim's stories. Take the one about finding a body in the park. He told me he stumbled across the remains of a man who had taken his own life, a discovery that left him shaken and forever changed. At first, I believed him without question. Who would make something like that up? But as time passed, the lack of corroborating details began to gnaw at me. I scoured the same local news archives, asked the same circle of longtime residents, and came up empty-handed once again. It was as though the event had never happened. Even the smaller lies, like the gang he claims to have been part of or the substance abuse issues he says he's overcome, don't hold up under scrutiny. I've never seen any evidence of these struggles, no scars from a life lived on the edge. Jim speaks of past friends who wronged him, painting them all as villains who turned their backs on him. But when I've pressed for specifics, the stories unravel into vagueness, their edges fraying until they're more fiction than fact. At what point does doubt become betrayal? I feel guilty for questioning Jim's stories, especially the ones that involve loss or trauma. What if I'm wrong? What if he's telling the truth, and my skepticism is hurting him in ways I can't see? But at the same time, I can't ignore the nagging feeling in my gut, the one that whispers that not everything is as it seems. I've spent so much of our relationship believing in Jim, trusting his version of events, and giving him the benefit of the doubt. But now, I'm starting to wonder if that trust was misplaced. If the stories that shaped my image of him are nothing more than carefully constructed illusions, what does that say about the foundation of our relationship? Can love survive when the ground beneath it feels like quicksand? These questions haunt me, keeping me awake long after Jim has fallen asleep. I want to believe him, I really do. But as the cracks in his stories grow wider, it feels like I'm watching the man I thought I knew crumble into someone I don't recognize. And the scariest part? I don't know if I have the strength to confront him, or if I'll like the answers I find if I do. The same questions that plague me about the story of his cousin apply to the one about the body he claimed to have found in the park. There are no news stories, no police reports, No whispers or rumors that such a tragedy ever occurred. In a town as small and tightly knit as ours, that kind of event would have left an imprint, a ripple in the collective memory. My dad's family has lived here for decades. They know the ins and outs of this place, its stories, and its history. Yet when I asked them about it, they responded with blank stares and a shake of the head. Nothing. No one remembers anything like that ever happening. And yet, Jim tells these stories with such conviction, such emotion, that it feels impossible to dismiss them outright. He's been my trusted person for so long, my confidant, my partner through the ups and downs of life. We've shared so much, our dreams, our fears, our secrets. How could I throw all of that away over doubts and inconsistencies? It feels wrong, unfair even, to question the foundation of a relationship that has meant so much to me. But at the same time, I can't deny how deeply these doubts have shaken me. I feel like I'm losing my grip on reality, like I'm stuck in a labyrinth where the walls shift and twist with every turn. One moment, I convince myself that I'm overthinking it, that I'm letting my insecurities cloud my judgment. The next, I'm staring at the glaring inconsistencies, the cracks in Jim's stories that seem too large to ignore. It's exhausting, this constant push and pull between trust and suspicion. I feel like I'm walking on a tightrope, and the slightest misstep could send everything crashing down. I don't want to hurt him. The thought of accusing Jim of lying, of questioning the very core of who he is, makes my stomach churn. What if I'm wrong? What if he's telling the truth, and my doubts are an unjustified betrayal of his trust? But what if I'm right? What if these stories are more than just exaggerations or half-truths? What if they're deliberate fabrications, designed to manipulate me, to keep me tethered to him through sympathy and guilt? The possibility chills me to the bone, but I can't shake it. I've been replaying our years together in my mind, trying to piece together the puzzle of Jim's behavior. There were moments when I felt truly seen, truly loved, moments that made me believe we could withstand anything life threw at us. But there were also moments that left me questioning my own sanity, moments where his anger, his accusations, his stories left me feeling small and uncertain. Was that love? Or was it control masquerading as love? The thought of confronting him fills me with dread. What would I even say? I don't believe you. I think you are lying. Those words feel like daggers, sharp and final, with the power to wound us both. But how can I move forward without addressing the elephant in the room? How can I rebuild trust when doubt has rooted itself so deeply in my heart? And then there's the question of investigating further. A part of me wants to keep digging, to find the truth at all costs, even if it means uncovering things I'd rather not know. But another part of me wonders if that's fair to Jim or to myself. Is it right to snoop, to pry, to treat the man I love like a suspect in a case? Or would that only drive a deeper wedge between us, one that can never be repaired? I'm standing at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take. Every option feels fraught with risk, and the weight of it all is crushing me. I want to do what's right for him, for me, for us. But I don't even know what right looks like anymore. As I sit here, pouring my heart into these words, I realize that I'm looking for something I've never truly had in this relationship: clarity. For years, I've let Jim's stories define our narrative, let his voice drown out my own. But now, it's my turn to speak, to decide, to take control of my own story. I don't have all the answers, and I may never find them. But I know this: I can't keep living in this state of limbo, caught between trust and doubt, love and fear. Something has to change. Whether that means confronting Jim, seeking outside help, or even walking away, I don't know yet. But for the first time, I'm willing to take that first step, even if it scares me. Because at the end of the day, I deserve to feel safe, loved, and secure. And maybe, just maybe, finding my own truth is the first step toward reclaiming my peace.